The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Welcome back to the Nova Society, a space where dialogue deepens understanding and civic responsibility comes to life. I'm Dr. Mark Bound, joined by our regular panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon. Together, we'll unpack the stories that matter most, exploring the headlines, the history, and the big ideas shaping today's conversations. Let's dive in and hear what the panel has for us today. So today we welcome back Dr. Stephen Ducat. Stephen's an author, political psychologist, psychoanalyst, and former psychology professor in the School of Humanities at New College in California. He holds a doctorate from Wright Institute in Berkeley, California. He completed his psychoanalytical training at the Psychoanalytical Institute of Northern California and holds licenses as a psychologist in both California and Oregon. He's also the author of Hatreds We Love, The Psychology of Political Tribalism in Post-Truth America, and that is available on Amazon Books and through audible.com. He is also the author of the Substack Mining Politics. Welcome back, Stephen. So, Scott's got some questions. Stephen, so does Brooklyn. Yes. Down in front, Brooklyn.
I'm sure everybody has questions. I was looking at a list of tweets or whatever you call them these days on Truth Social, beginning at 12 a.m. I'm just going to run them down real quick. 12 a.m. demands Chuck Schumer resigns. 12:19 posted a tweet saying Obama tried to overthrow the government in 2016. 12:22 reposts a statement from Mike Lee calling for the filibuster to be removed. 12:27, oh my God, 5 minutes in between, posted a conspiracy video alleging that Obama and Hillary Clinton committed treason. 12:27, not even a second after, a tweet from a MAGA account calling for Obama and Clinton to be arrested for treason. 12:28, another post, treason against Obama and Clinton. 12:28, again, another post about treason by Obama and Clinton. 12:29, posts an AI image of a man holding a sign. I'm not really sure what that's all about. 1:13 a.m., demands that the 2020 election be wiped from the books and be no further force or effect. 12:43, post about Clint Eastwood giving him a compliment. 12:44, post about Elon Musk calling the Southern Poverty Law Center a scam. And then 12:45, post about a far-right podcast. Dr. Ducat, please tell us, what does this signal to you? What is this all about?
Can you spell impulsivity, boys and girls? Well, this is what it looks like. I mean, this is also what it looks like when there is nobody in his orbit who can say no to him, who can give him anything resembling critical feedback, and who can only adore him. There's no ability. I mean, his reality testing is already impaired, but when nobody can actually give you feedback about the impacts of your actions, it becomes really malignant. So that's my quick take. That this is somebody that who is surrounded by the funhouse mirrors of praise, and that's all he gets.
But but all night long, on it furiously on his phone. I mean, they. I remember when Barack Obama became president, they took his BlackBerry. There were still Blackberries, I guess, back in those days. They took his away from him and said, "Oh no, you can't have this while you're president." And he was like, "Oh my God, I was on that thing all the time. That was my. How come nobody's taken this away from this guy?"
Well, it is amazing that given all the time he spends carefully developing policy. And writing his memoirs and legislation, you would think that he might not have the time. I mean, what a resilient guy.
Yeah. There was actually somebody who matched up the official White House schedule with his tweets, and most of them during the day come when he's supposed to be in a meeting.
Yes. Well, that's what he catches up on his sleep, clearly.
Yes, exactly.
That's what meetings are for, aren't they?
That really is some picture of him being
Well, you
asleep
know what?
there.
Somebody's got to be happy about this, like Melania, because if he's doing this, he's leaving her alone.
Yeah, that's right.
He's not even
Right.
the same locale, probably.
Probably not.
Yeah. Well, what are your thoughts, Scott, about that?
He's manic. Is that? I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I only took Psych 101 in college. I never went back again to take another one, so I'm not really qualified.
All you need is Psych 1 for Trump. You don't need even 101.
Yeah, well, that's what they called it. And I actually took it at the same time as another course because I was an arrogant young freshman. And I used to go to the other course and not go to Psych 101. I only went when we had tests to take the tests. But this is some crazy behavior. And I mean,
it's crazy behavior, but I think it's only understandable in context.
Okay.
In other words, anybody else who did this would be, either living on the street, unemployed, unhirable, or would be having his needs met at a care center of some kind. But instead, no limits are placed on him whatsoever. No critical feedback interrupts his daydreams. This is what it looks like. I mean, there's a lot more to understand about him, but in terms of this behavior and other behavior, including everything from tweeting to declaring war, and the two things are of equal weight to him, because no skin off his back. Nobody in his family is going to be doing the dying. There are no consequences.
It's true, because it seems like he's finally sort of met his match in this Supreme Court ruling on the tariffs, because now there are all these companies, and I think there's something like 300,000 companies that had to pay tariffs.
Yeah.
They've I'm sure they have the receipts, and I'm sure they could say, look at this, when our product hit the customs, we had to pay X amount of money, and we want that money back. The Supreme Court says we can have that back. And Trump is now claiming that the Supreme Court should have had just a phrase of a few words to say that they don't have to pay them back, which means that he's finally admitting that it's not China or some other country paying the tariffs, but American companies.
Exactly. And of course, you may have heard he went all mob boss on those companies, saying, yeah, I know that I'm supposed to be paying you, but boy, it would be really nice. I would look on you with such favor if you didn't try to get a refund. I would remember you. I think those are his exact words.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, it's incredible because almost a third of the country is still behind him. When you look at the disapproval polls, they're pretty high, probably almost record high.
Among Democrats and independents, but among Republicans, there's been very little movement. I think the hardest thing to accept about the Trump era is that he is giving a portion of what this country wants. Sadistic punishment for outgroups, cruelty served up around the world. He is giving the base what they want. And that is, to me, the most disturbing thing. Yes, he's a psychopath, but the fact that he is a psychopath celebrated, if not worshipped, by a very significant plurality of the country is the most disturbing to me.
What you got, Brooke?
Well, I have more than two questions, but the first two that I keep revolving around in my mind. You saw, Stephen, and thank you for coming back very much. The DoorDash grandma.
Oh yeah.
Where Trump was talking about how he helped people, and of course that he would even imagine himself as a doctor at all or a medical doctor was, I thought, absolutely ludicrous. But where he started to say he really helped people, just like he helped those 11,000, and then there some number 600, whatever it was that he said, but he never finished that number. He suddenly broke off and turned only his head to the right to the DoorDash grandma and completely non sequitur asked her a separate question. And I wondered what caused him, in your view, to end his idea about the 11,000, whatever number of people he supposedly helped, and completely break away from that idea and start an entirely different topic.
Well, that's kind of vintage Trump in a lot of ways. I mean, he can't hardly complete a thought or a sentence without getting distracted and chasing his tail. And I think he calls it the weave, right? It's as positive a spin as he can put on his tangentiality. I think there are a number of aspects to the DoorDash grandma episode. On one level, it was clunky political theater, starring a known Republican operative. It was designed to use the no tax on tips policy to camouflage the tax on everything else reality. And this is a way in which Trump is a kind of unconscious postmodernist, and that he mocks his own lies. There really is no truth. Yeah, this is a performance. He even alluded to that in the course of the performance, like an aside to the audience. What is it? Breaking the third screen. Wall. Is it? Yeah, the fourth wall. Yeah, breaking the fourth wall. Right. A classic move. In theater. So there, on the one hand, he's trying to use this, but he couldn't even convince him. He couldn't even act like it was true. But on another level, and I haven't seen anybody mention this, that however fake the performance was, it was part of an unexamined right-wing national health care narrative that normalizes the necessity for a grandma to take a minimum wage job to pay for her husband's cancer care. That just goes by, unremarked. In between all of that is his word salad. And I do think that, he does suffer from a combination of some, variation of cognitive decline and malignant narcissism. But both are made worse by the fact that he is not held to account. Neither spelling nor the rules of grammar limit him. And he can say whatever he wants, however he wants, and he will meet nothing but praise and adoration. So again, there's no ability to reality test. In a way, this, in my mind, connects to the Iran war. In addition to being impulsive, in addition to not having anyone around him set limits, he's devoid of empathy, even self-serving empathy. Empathy in the sense of not caring about people, but understanding the world through their eyes. And so for him, lacking empathy doesn't just, or anyone, lacking empathy doesn't just make you an asshole, but in war, it's suicidal. The central impairment of malignant narcissism is the inability to grasp the thoughts, emotions, and agency of others. You don't have to even respect it, but you have to acknowledge its reality. And so, of course, Trump couldn't anticipate the actions of the Iranian regime, which were easily predicted by others. So, this is all, again, it's part of the context-dependent nature of Trump's pathology. An ordinary person wouldn't get away with this, but he's not held to account by anything. And anyway, those are my thoughts off the top.
Thank you, and thank you. And my second question, I've heard, and I can't remember which news, but I've heard this more than once from analysts or news, journalists. They're saying, well, finally, Trump is starting to understand, from the polls what his real situation is, or he's starting to understand that the Iranians are really serious about this, or that he hasn't destroyed their navy or their ability to fight back, and he's starting to understand the difficulty that he's in, and he's really starting to understand this, and he's starting to understand that. And I'm thinking to myself, yes, but is he really? Because of the cognitive decline. Taking what I learned from dealing with my late partner and his ischemic stroke from the LVAD and the damage that it did to his brain with the receptive and expressive aphasia. But this thing was so large, it was the size of a Kennedy $50, and it was here. And the psychiatrist told me that it was close enough to his frontal lobes to irritate his frontal lobes.
No, this was a mass you're talking about, or the stroke?
It was an ischemic stroke, and it was here, and it caused a blood clot,
like a BTI. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and it caused a BTI, and my late partner took the MOCA test, and he got a 2 the first time. Wow. And and they were telling me that probably the best I could hope for was to put him in a locked ward. And the second time he took it, he got a 10, and then he refused to take it anymore. But I wound up with him at home, trying to take care of him myself.
Oh, God. I'm so sorry you went through that. That sounds so
I have not
painful.
recovered. Yeah, I have not really recovered, and he's been gone for nearly 5 years now. It was very difficult. And he would, when his frontal lobe was irritated, he would get this gleam in his eye, like somebody who has schizophrenia, like this manic look, and you could see that he wasn't all there, and he would become impulsive, and he would become unreachable. It would be dangerous, and he would be verbally abusive, physically,
Wow.
So I can understand why people would just want to say okay to Trump, whatever you want, and try to appease him. And it's exactly the wrong thing to do. And I think that Trump needs to be in a locked ward, personally. But you cannot appease him. You cannot talk to him. You cannot deal with him. And this is not going to get any better. But that's just the only experience that I've had, and I'm not a medical doctor. And so I wonder to what depth Trump actually understands what he's doing. I mean, and now we've got the Falklands, where Britain really doesn't have any right to the Falklands, and Spain should be kicked out of NATO, and this, that, and the other.
Well, because Milei is his ally. It's his MAGA ally.
Yes, exactly.
And that's what determines policy, is what have you done for me? What praise have you given me lately?
Right. Exactly. So, I mean, how much is Trump? Is he in there? And I know that sometimes a person is kind of there, and sometimes a person is kind of not. And so it's very difficult to tell how much of the person.
I obviously I can't know fully, but what we do know is that he's had a reality compromising personality disorder long before he had any kind of dementia. Other people are not real to him. Other people are things, and they're to be moved around on a political or business chessboard in order to maximize self-interest. And that's part of what it means to not have empathy. So his ability to understand reality is compromised by that. And then you add what is, clearly some cognitive impairment, which we can see in his language, his tangentiality. his ability to form a complete thought. And so what you have is a kind of profoundly malignant synergy between two different kinds of disabilities in a context in which nobody is going to hold him to account. Part of not holding him to account is not just that they're, afraid of him blowing up, but he has created a world like any mob boss in which everybody around him has an investment in corruption. You can have your turf, you can do whatever you want, commit any crimes you want, as long as you are loyal to me and defer to me, and maybe give me a little bit off the top. So he has created, that he likes people who are corrupt, and he likes people who are not very competent, because people who are not competent aren't going to outshine him. They're not going to eclipse him. And there's something nihilistic about him. I think he kind of revels in destruction. And, if Putin is not paying him, he should be paid, because he's certainly doing precisely what any foreign adversary would want, which is demolishing the country from the inside, demolishing science, demolishing education, destroying healthcare. Pretty much, taking a bulldozer to democracy along with the East Wing. So that's the context. So you've got his disorders, his disabilities, his impairments in a setting in which everybody around him is invested in propping him up. So at least so they can cash out, like that guy who just made $400 on the war in Iran. Well, 400 million. I don't know what it was, but a lot of money on the betting markets, prediction market.
Right.
So that's my short take on it.
This idea that you have explained, which is what's the name of it? Collective. It's like, so when Trump does something, and it could be something really egregious that everybody recognizes as egregious, like portraying himself as Jesus. And it aggravates people, of course, that there's a certain amount of people out there who think, oh my God, this guy's a genius. He manages to piss everybody off. And that's good for me because why?
Well, it's not that he's pissing everybody off, but he's pissing off the people we hate. So,
right.
Triggering the libs, he's being politically incorrect. That is a virtue in MAGA world. And of course, being politically incorrect is a euphemism for being frankly racist, among other meanings. So if you're frankly misogynist and racist, and preferably if you have a history of sexual assault, you're admirable in MAGA world, because it shows that you're not constrained, by these, these soy boy liberal moralists, and you spit in their face.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that is, part of what they admire. I mean, Trump is, I may have used this phrase in our conversations. In my book, I call it, that Trump is a permissive superego for antisocial behavior. The superego is that kind of metaphorical part of the mind coined by Freud that guides, that it's our conscience. And so what Trump has done is he's kind of encouraged people to use him as a permissive superego that says, hey, you go ahead and do whatever you want. Yeah, you smash that suspect's head, on the frame of the police car. That's okay. You beat these people up and I'll bail you out. There's so many versions of that. I'm sure you've heard.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's Trump being this permissive superego, so it's not just his his corrupt inner circle. It's, the entire MAGA base, 1/3 of the country, to whom he functions in this way psychologically.
Right. The phrase that I was looking for is identity fusion.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
And when he does something like it was revealed today in the Washington Post that he's charging the country a 2.5% contractor's fee for the building of the ballroom, which they worked out as being about $10 billion.
Mm.
And, I mean, he's not high. He did try to hide it. Nobody was giving that up, but freedom of information still works out there. So the reporters from the Washington Post found the contract and looked it over and saw that in there. So he's clearly ripping off everything that he can with both hands.
Yeah.
And yet, because of this identity fusion idea, there are people out there who don't have enough money. Like if they got a $400 bill coming out of nowhere, would be in trouble of paying it, which happens all the time. Somebody has to take an ambulance somewhere, and now the ambulance companies are turning around and giving them a bill. It's not covered by insurance or whatever, and they go into bankruptcy because of it. They're cool with Trump doing this.
Yeah, and that's because, well, I used to, the biggest political psychological question that has plagued me for a long time, that has, been kind of the motive for everything I've written, has been why people vote against their own self-interest, why people vote against their own material self-interest, support a man that makes their lives poorer, sicker, and shorter. And I realized, in the course of writing this book on political tribalism, Hatreds We Love, that I had been kind of naive about what constituted self-interest. That actually, even more important than material self-interest, even more important than the lives and health of your loved ones, is tribal membership. And it's because what you're saying about identity fusion, that your sense of self is so tied in with the tribe, the group, in this case, the group of in the MAGA cult, that any attack on the leader or any attack on the group feels like a wound, feels like an attack on you, an attack on your sense of self. I mean, it's kind of why, when Khan is discovered, Marx will often double down on the Khan, in part because their identity is tied up in it, and the humiliation of recognizing that they've been conned is so great that they double down on their faith in the con man. And so that continues to be what seems, what's driving the MAGA base. And what will it take to break that? It's hard to say. I mean, there's some people who have broken away from Trump. Some people who, like some of the hardcore MAGA, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owen, Megyn Kelly, Marjorie Taylor Greene. They've broken away because of some of the obvious hypocrisy. Now, even Tucker Carlson is pretending he didn't know these things before, but he had condemned Trump long ago. His motivations were entirely mercenary. And how do we know that? Well, we have his emails in the discovery for the Dominion voting machine case, in which he said, we can't acknowledge that Trump lost the election, otherwise our stock price will go down the next day. So he's known who Trump was all along. But the many layers down in the MAGA cult, they're still very much bought in, and what it will take to break their cult identity, it's hard to say. Maybe it's their sons and daughters being drafted into a self-destructive war. Who knows what it will take. People are starting to defect, but it's primarily independents and some of those high-placed MAGA people. But then there are people like Sean Hannity, who is a devoted Catholic who has disavowed Catholicism because Trump doesn't like the Pope this week. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah,
Good day for us Catholics.
Yeah.
All right, so Stephen, I'm going to go a little bit different onto this because I think what we know about Trump is pretty obvious. He's a pathological liar, and he's very good at it. I'll say if he has a skill, that's it. His ability to pathologically lie. He does give compelling narratives. He does use the victim and hero persona. He's got hooks, and it's actually beginning to reduce a little bit. But he does say partial truths that are woven into the lies to make a narrative that he wants to see.
Right.
And so we see that. So my issue, first of all, we know the MAGA people are the MAGA people. Most people that are in MAGA cult probably, it's like Scientology. They just simply can't admit, to where they are or to admit that they're wrong, which is a normal human propensity. We don't like to admit that we're wrong. But I was reading about something that kind of explains the other group that aren't in MAGA. They're against Trump. And they just seem to lose their ability to critically and analytically think through things because of the gaslight. I found a term, gaslight-induced cognitive disorder.
Yeah.
Which is really, you've got a pathological liar who you don't believe. He has basically manipulated you, and then your ability to critically think through logically goes away. And I think we're seeing a lot of that. When somebody says about taking Canada, that is so illogical, it's not even funny. If you look at the facts of it. Well, I'm sorry, Brooke, you're top on my. Actually, Brooke, this is actually designed directly toward you. It's not going to happen. He said he was going to take Greenland. Well, that never happened. We all know that he says he's going to do something, and if there's a Trump consistency, it's going to be in 2 weeks, and then it never happens, and then we move on to the next, type of crisis. But this gaslight-induced cognitive disorder, where people have been so traumatized, even those people against him, that they have lost their ability to critically and analytically think. What is there for them, Stephen? I mean, how can we help them?
Well, so I'm trying to identify who these people are and how we would know when we see them. I mean, in other words, they're not people.
I'm pointing right now.
Yeah, and I'm waving because one of them's probably me. Although some of the stuff that Trump has said he's going to do, he has done, like bombing this and cutting off, stopping U.S. aid and ending food programs and
but that's policy,
things like that.
That's policy. I mean, that presidents are allowed to make policy. That's policy. Is it bad policy? Of course it's bad policy.
Absolutely.
But the fact is that we take it beyond just the policies. We say, oh, well, he did this. Well, that's a lot different than trying to take over Canada.
Well, let we pull back and think, in a kind of a general way.
Okay.
As a self-serving, amoral psychopath, Trump will do whatever he can get away with. We know that about him. He not only is a liar, but he feels entitled to do whatever he wants. So he did invade Nicaragua, and because Nicaragua is a chaotic place and
Nicaragua.
I'm sorry, not Nicaragua, Venezuela. I meant to say Venezuela, because Venezuela, and he had some people on the inside too. So he was able to pull off, due to the efficiencies of the military, this abduction. That seems to have emboldened him. And he thinks he can get away with anything. So far, what Trump has done, not just threatened to do, is that he regularly murders fishermen in the Pacific. and the Caribbean on a regular basis. He makes up this story about being, drug traffickers. Who knows? He doesn't feel he has to prove it to anybody. He is threatened genocide and also helped to implement it, bombing civilian targets in Iran. He thought that this would be a easy, quick, and done. But nobody has really said no to him. And so, I can tell you one group of people who took Trump's threats against Greenland seriously was the Danish military, who were on the verge of blowing up airfields, the major airfield in Greenland, in anticipation of a Trump invasion. Now, they pulled back at the last minute because Trump went after another shiny object. But they take it pretty seriously. Now, I don't think that it's a sure thing, and probably unlikely that he would invade Canada. But if he thought he could get away with it, I don't think who's going to stop him? Who's going to say no to him? It's all about his calculation of self-interest. What will this get me? Maybe sometimes the gratification is simple vengeance. Sometimes it's monetary. Often it's both. So I don't know. I wouldn't claim to know what I don't even think it's likely that he would invade Canada. But I also don't think at this point we have yet to see anybody stop him from doing something.
And I totally understand that. I truly do get that. But here's where we sit. We are in a war with Iran, and let's face it, nobody here likes Iran, basically, and it still isn't very popular. Right. And going after the friendly Canadians, just seems like a stupid idea. And who would stop them? The rest of the world. Because let's face it, we would then be against the rest of the world. And even though Trump in his derangement may not understand that, I really would hope that, CENTCOM and some of those other things inside the government would say, listen, we can't do this. We will not do this. I'm a firm believer that the system will hold, that it will bend almost to the point of breaking, but it will hold. There are still red lines that exist. And I think that when we get into this gaslight-induced cognitive distortion, I think we are taking our eye off of the ball, the really important things. And let's face it, that's probably part of the strategy. Look over here we used to have a German short-haired pointer. Great dog until a leaf went by or a squirrel, and ooh, squirrel. I mean, that's what he's doing to people.
Flooding the zone with shit is the term they use.
Say that again?
Flooding the zone with shit.
Exactly, and that's exactly what it is. And so when it comes up about this thing with Canada, I always dismiss it because, first of all, understanding international relations, understanding the logistics, understanding that the people don't even like the war with a country that we traditionally don't like, it's just not logical to think that even though Trump is deranged, even though Trump is in my mind, I'm going to give the clinical term, batshit crazy, the system in some way, it may bend in certain things, but it will not break. And I think that's where I have my faith. And my problem is that we have some people that really are good at critical analytical thinking, and they get into this condition that they can't break out of it. And they aren't paying attention to the real things that we should be paying attention to.
The Kuzma or the USMCA, depending on which country you're in, the replacement for NAFTA talks are coming up, or are supposedly coming up soon. And as I understand it, there is a list that I don't know how many points are on it, that the United States has demands that Canada must meet in concessions before the United States will even agree to sit down. It's like an entry fee that Canada has to make of concessions before the U.S. will even agree to sit down to talk to them, whereas there are no U.S. concessions that in kind.
All right, so
Canada.
Brooke, you're Canada. How far is that going to fly with you?
Forget it.
You're over talking to China. You're over talking to India. You don't really need us anymore.
No, forget it.
How far is that going to go with you? So, okay, who does that hurt? That's right.
Oh,
and I'm sure Mark Carney, who's a pretty smart guy, is probably going to say, forget it.
Yeah, that's what I would say. I mean, it will hurt the Canadians to a point because there's still a lot of trade going across the border.
Well, of course there is. But there's a lot of trade coming from them to us.
I don't think there's a scenario in which Canada submits to the U.S.
No,
the thing that worries me is in the other direction. And you mentioned, Mark, that there are red lines. Well, where was the red line in declaring and enacting an illegal war unilaterally against Iran and then demanding the rest of the world join? I mean, there are real bombs and real bullets happening. And so what we know is that Trump has done everything he can to eliminate any accountability, including getting rid of inspector generals, installing a jingoistic Christian crusader lunatic as a head of the Department of Defense.
But he knows his Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, that's true. But he doesn't know it's fiction. That's the problem.
I mean, here's the thing about Canada. We get 40, I think it's like close to 45% of our oil from Canada. If Canada just said, you know what, you keep talking about the Hormuz Strait and how you don't need it because you can make your own oil, why don't you do that for a while? Because we don't. It's just a lie, And,
and when you talk about red lines, Stephen, the red line was drawn by the other nations when they said, no, we're not going to help you.
Yeah, but that wasn't within the U.S. Yes, you're right. Other nations are saying, fuck you. We're not going to put up with this.
Is that a clinical term?
Yeah, that's a clinical term.
There you go. Clinical term.
Was that available to us? Because I would love to be able to say that.
You probably would have gone. You would have gone to Psych 101 more often if they used the term "fuck you" as a clinical term.
It might have. Certainly, as a 17-year-old, I would have been interested in it.
Okay, so and history will make a determination on whether or not Trump's attack on Iran was illegal or legal, and there will be repercussions for it eventually. Probably not in any of our lifetime, because these things, are always pushed way down the road. Yes, the system, but again, now the question is, was it an illegal order to do it? Again, that's going to be debated for years and decades of whether or not this was illegal or whether it was legal. But the red line was drawn by the other nations. And when we talk about things like Canada, that's where if our system was to bend that much, and I do not believe that it would. And here's the thing that gets me with Trump and Canada. If you added Canada to the United States, you've just assured the Democrats a win across the board. You'd never see another Republican voted in ever.
Yeah.
Because that's just the way they are.
The only way that would work is if Trump declared himself King of Canada.
King of Canada. Yes, that was it. There you go. But
King Donald Jesus Trump of Canada.
King Donald Jesus Doctor King Donald Jesus of Canada.
In addition to Venezuela, which he's already talking about.
But my attitude, and it's always been, I've been a proponent of this, that the system, it bends, but it will hold at some point in time. And again, we're paying attention to Canada. And I like Canada. Been there many, many times. I love Canadians. I like hockey. Yes, I even will drink a Molson's beer every once in a while. But the fact is that I just cannot, in my mind, when you look at the geopolitics of it, to think that the system would bend that much.
If by system you're talking about the rest of the world, I agree. If you're talking about what is now an autocratic American administration in which no dissent, no regulation, no contradiction, no law, no court ruling is honored. I mean, that's our present reality. They blithely ignore court rulings, this administration, because there's no one to enforce it. They are the enforcers.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, there's no, Stephen, I totally agree with you. But the fact is that when we look at the system, when I talk about the system, I'm talking about courts. I'm also talking about the military. And we don't really know what is going on behind the scenes as far as the Iraq war, as far as the military's position on this is. We really don't know. We hear, Pete Crazy Hegseth say what he says. And the fact is, again, you can't trust that. So, if we were a fly in the wall, I think we would probably feel better, because there was reporting that it was possible that when he was talking about bombing bridges and he was talking about bombing power plants in Iran, that CENTCOM came out and said, no, you can't do that. We just can't do that. Now, we don't know if that reporting is correct or if it's not correct, but it was floated out there. And my hope is that some of these honorable military people that are still there still have that sense to say, you know what, we can't do that. I don't care. I'll go back to Dr. Strangelove. I don't care if it's your bodily fluids that we are protecting. We can't do that. Yeah, bro.
Well, you know how he responds to those honorable people. The minute they poke their head up and identify themselves as honorable, they are out. They're fired the next day.
Absolutely. He fired the Secretary of Navy.
Yeah, I know. My understanding of that was because the man supposedly questioned the technical possibility of that idiot Trump battleship and the rail gun that we were talking about the other day, and the lasers. I mean, a rail gun is, I mean, that's still in being tried and tested, and they can't make it work. And you can't mount something that melts the rails that it shoots from on a ship.
On a Trump-designed battleship, you can. Sure, why not? I mean, you can do that.
It all exists in fairyland. So you can do anything in fairyland.
It's all fairyland. So they got rid of him. I mean, there's 2 out of the 8 Joint Chiefs that they started with. There's 2 left, as I understand.
All right, and the Secretary of Navy also was let go because he had arguments with Hegseth over promotions.
Right.
And Hegseth fired something like 20-something generals. I don't know the exact amount. But...
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of stuff going on, and you're right. They serve at the pleasure of the president. Unfortunately, that's the way our system is set up. But still, you even start hearing things from Raising Cane, who really wasn't qualified to be the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. His comments are a lot more muted now than they were before. When they bring him out, he doesn't say a lot. He kind of keeps it to himself. So again, that's the system that I hope, and I truly do hope, and I hope that more people could start to look at this. And I understand why people are afraid. They've been manipulated for 10 years. I get it. I absolutely get it. And I just hope that when this all passes, and it will eventually, this too shall pass, that they'll be able to go back to being able to critically and analytically look at situations and think them through and say, yeah, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But I do have one last question for you, Stephen. So Trump is going to the dinner, the media dinner.
The White House correspondence.
The White House correspondence.
The scene of the original crime.
How do you think that's going to go?
It all depends on how much control he exerts over it. I mean, of course, as we know, that was the world's original sin, was Obama making a joke about him. And because he's such a brittle narcissist and cannot laugh at himself, he's been avenging that humiliation for, well, I don't know how many. It's been 15 years now. I don't know exactly how long. But he's been on a crusade of vengeance. So my guess is that nobody is going to be allowed to make any joke, say anything that in any way it could be remotely construed as critical. we'll see. We'll see what kind of control he can exercise over that.
As I understand it, he's going to take the stage first, insult the media, and then leave.
Yeah.
So that anything they say about him, he's not going to be there for.
So why would somebody like Trump put himself in this position, Stephen? Why risk it? Because if he does like what Scott just said, gets up there, says his stuff, talks his smack, and then leaves, he's now left the room open, and the cameras are still going to be rolling, and those people are absolutely going to skewer him because.
And who is wielding those cameras? CBS, right? The new magnified CBS.
That's possible.
And we don't know what sort of deals or agreements have been made in advance about, muting the broadcast of anybody who says anything critical. We don't know.
No, we don't.
And so, so we don't know. I can't really answer your question about why he would do it. I can only surmise that he did it because he thought it was low risk, and he would get some benefit out of it. He would be on another stage. He'd be broadcast, on a podium, and everybody would watch, and he would look triumphant.
Or it'll just take the bad news off the headlines for a couple of days.
Yeah,
because he'll say enough shitty things out there that'll get take attention away from other things that are going on that are more important, but everybody only has so much bandwidth, and so that'll be the thing of it. He just throws more shit at the wall, and everybody reacts to it, and for a couple of days he doesn't have to deal with Iran, or he doesn't have to deal with the Epstein files. He just has to deal with the fallout from this, and everybody will say, well, he went there voluntarily, he's joking, you guys are making such a big deal about it, he owns you once again, he got you all slobbering over yourselves, all that kind of stuff.
And let's not forget go ahead.
I mean, no, go on, because my last thought is a last thought.
Well, I was just going to say that just remember that Barry Weiss, the new head of CBS News, has already censored and rendered, invisible a 60 Minutes piece that was unflattering to Trump. She's already done that.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't expect her loyalty to Trump to change. So we don't know what that will look like, how it will get manifested in this particular event.
Well, I was going to end on a hopeful note.
That reminds me, I didn't know about the correspondent dinner. I'm not particularly interested in that, but the G20 meeting is coming up, and apparently Putin is being invited also to come to Mar-a-Lago, which is going to put the other members of the meeting alliance, whatever it is, in a big quandary whether they come. First of all, to go to Mar-a-Lago, period, but also if Putin is there.
He should be arrested immediately.
Oh, of course he should be. So the question is, Stephen, what, and also, what do you think is going to be upcoming with the midterm elections? Because the longer this goes on, in terms of Trump's behavior and the more crimes he commits, in my view, the more existential it becomes for him to make sure he doesn't lose.
Right. This is the last opportunity, I think, for any accountability. And he knows that. He knows that he's not going to survive, that his next vacation will be behind bars if he doesn't somehow stop the election, inhibit enough votes. And the good news is that elections are decentralized in the U.S. So it's very hard for him to steal it. He can send out his personal militia, to swing state voting centers. I have a feeling that it will make people even more defiant. I don't think Americans will put up with such a blatant attempt to stop their vote. And who knows? Maybe there'll be, gun battles at polling booths. It wouldn't surprise me. But this is his last chance. and he knows it. So
Yeah.
put on your seatbelt.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Oh,
I
good.
absolutely put on the seatbelts. And one of the points you made about CBS. Here's the thing: even when Trump goes, those people that have taken over those news agencies, and we were talking about this with Hungary.
Yeah.
Even though the Prime Minister of Hungary is out, Orban, his successor, who is still very, very conservative, still has to deal with the main news sources of Hungary that are controlled by Orban
Yeah.
allies. And we're going to be pretty much in the same position
Oh yeah.
today, and after Trump is long and long gone. And I think that is another danger that, as we start to look at it again, people, critical analytical thinking. If it seems like paranoia, it probably is. I don't know. I'm not even a psychologist, but I did attend Psych 101, Scott, and I actually went to the class. In fact,
All right. Well, you're much more qualified then.
oh, no, well, not really. No, not qualified at all. All right, guys. Hey, Stephen, thank you so much. Thanks for coming back on. I mean, you cleared up a lot of things, and you make a lot of very, very good points. And you're right. We need to really, buckle up, Buttercup, because it's going to be a ride.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a lot of fun. Well, take care, you guys.
All right.
All right,
Thank you,
ta-
Stephen.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Stephen.
And I
everyone.
hope-
Thank you.
I hope you'll come back again.
Certainly.
And that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We want to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing team, Apple Podcasts, the largest source of podcast and music online, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your destination for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. And most importantly, we want to thank you, our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society could not be possible. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing on the platform of your choice. It's easy, it's free, and helps our channel grow. For questions or comments, you can reach us at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So on behalf of Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershworth, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power of society is knowledge. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Phoenix Research Group, an independent research consortium dedicated to providing solutions to social and political issues for NGOs and international government agencies. Through multidisciplinary, nonpartisan, and unbiased research, the Phoenix Research Group advances understanding and practical strategies for complex challenges. The Phoenix Research Group is a division of the Phoenix Research Institute, the producer of the Nova Society podcast.